building and has left a very big hole. And then 18 minutes later, a second one went into the other twin tower.
Can you paint a picture of us of the situation in New York, an everyday morning situation, presumably pretty busy in the streets, people going about their business?
Well, it's a beautiful day here in New York. Everyone's out on the street, everyone's on their rooftops, everyone's on their mobile phones. I don't think people can quite believe what's happened.
Given that this is the financial district then, we were hearing from Helen, of course, that they begin business early in the city. Is it your understanding that people may actually be inside the World Trade Center?
I think without a shadow of a doubt there'll be people in there. They get to work very early.
And what about the emergency services? Presumably they're converging en masse on the trouble spot.
Yeah, chaos here. There's, I think they're pretty organised here in New York when such emergencies do happen, but I think this one has taken them completely by surprise.
Have you seen the response of the emergency services? Has anybody, any injured people, have they been brought from the building so far?
Well, all the hospitals are obviously on alert, and they are expecting a lot of casualties. But at the moment, there's no news of them.
Nick, thank you for that eyewitness report. That was Nick Jones, who also happens to be my husband, reporting live there from New York. We're looking at pictures of the World Trade Center. It's been on the receiving end of an assault of 2 passenger planes. We understand there may be news of these planes being hijacked. One plane flew into the side of the World Trade Center, near the top of the World Trade Center. As a result, the World Trade Center was on fire. Just as that was happening, another plane, and it looks like a fairly significant sized passenger jet, flew lower down. There was an explosion, and as a result, the situation only got worse. As we were hearing there, of course, it's a busy morning in the financial district of New York, in Battery Park, which is where the Twin Towers are situated. The World Trade Center was, of course, at the center of a terrorist attack back in 1993. At the moment, we have no details on why the planes hit the building, nor of any deaths or injuries. We're now going to go back live to the newsroom and to Helen Wright, our reporter, who's got the very latest. Helen, what do you have for us now?
Well, we're hearing reports from a Briton who is living in an apartment close to the World Trade Center. He's saying he was awoken this morning by a huge explosion. Obviously, that's evident from the pictures we're seeing. He's saying that the whole of the building where he is living shook. He ran to the window, as lots of other people in his building did, to see what was going on. Everybody in the area, he says, is panicking. Everybody is saying, he says, that they believe this is a terrorist attack. Everybody in the area absolutely terrified. Chaos on the streets, as Nick was saying, as the situation unfolds and as the emergency services rush to deal with this developing situation.
Helen, do we have any idea whether the buildings around are being evacuated?
Well, I've spoken to people in the City of London today who've been desperately trying to get hold of their colleagues in the New York financial district, where of course the World Trade Center is. And I have been told by people in London that office blocks in the surrounding financial district are in fact being evacuated. People are being sent home, or they're being told not to come into work.
We heard there from Nick in New York that, of course, there appeared to be a massive amount of emergency services, of ambulances, fire vehicles and so on gathering. Have you heard any more from our other source as to whether or not it seems to be well organised, the evacuation?
Well, as Nick was saying, the emergency services in New York are incredibly well organised. They are prepared and trained to deal with these situations. But this is such a huge area, an enormous building, which must be now in a very unstable structural condition. So they will have to deal with that, as well as the developing explosions and the situation with people on the ground.
So the pictures we're seeing here are of the World Trade Center in New York. 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center. First thing in the morning, New York time, of course, we can see the smoke billowing from all the broken windows. We can see the damage that's been caused, significant hole in the side, on that side of the World Trade Center. And the other plane, which flew in minutes after the initial attack, flew in on the far side. We can see that obviously a great amount of damage has been caused there. So these are live pictures from New York, from the World Trade Center. Now, Helen, obviously it's a very busy building with hundreds, possibly even thousands of people working there. We can only imagine that all of the hospitals and all of the emergency services will be stretched to the limit.
I would imagine that the hospitals and emergency services are now rushing in extra staff to deal with this situation. As you say, they will be stretched to the limit. Every hospital in the city must now be expecting, or must have been warned to expect casualties from this. These are huge buildings, obviously where thousands of people go to work. They're also visited by tourists. This explosion, I'm told, happened at about 8:50 a.m. local time, 10 to 9 local time this morning, when, as you can imagine, many people will have been at work, other people will have been arriving for a day at work. So the implications of these two planes crashing into both towers of the World Trade Center are absolutely devastating.
Now, we are expecting some sort of official statement from, I think, the emergency services shortly. We'll bring you that as soon as we get it. But what we can see now is the size of the hole and the damage that has been caused in the side of the World Trade Center. A massive explosion, followed by a second one as the second plane crashed into the World Trade Center. A gaping hole in the side there, billowing with smoke and fumes. And of course, we can only imagine at the appalling chaos that must be taking place inside the World Trade Center now as people attempt to escape this devastating situation. The second hole is on the side of the other, of course these are twin towers in New York, on the side of the other building, which seems to have been hit a good deal further down, hit almost in its center. New York, of course, famed for its skyscrapers, but the twin towers of the World Trade Center stand out across the whole of Manhattan as a landmark. So across the whole of Manhattan this morning, everybody is out on the streets, as we heard, looking skyward and being appalled and amazed by what they see before them. Let's go back now to Helen Wright, who's our reporter in the newsroom with the very latest. The pictures we're seeing now, Helen, show just what devastation is being endured there in the centre of New York.
Utter devastation. It's an absolutely terrifying sight. These two enormous buildings, smoke billowing from the top of them. I can see the pictures here, holes gaping in the sides of the building. Just a few minutes ago, we all an explosion in one of the towers when what we think was the second aircraft flew into the second tower. I've just been given information, a little bit more information about what's going on the ground. You were asking about people working in the area, in buildings near to the World Trade Center. I've just been told that the trading floor of the New York NYMEX exchange has been evacuated after these explosions at the World Trade Center. It's the world's largest physical commodities exchange, which of course means that there are lots of people there who trade on that trading floor in person, a hectic working area. That's now been evacuated. As I told you earlier, I've heard that office blocks in the area have also been evacuated, or people told not to come into work at all. Obviously many people though will still be in the area watching this terrible unfolding situation before their eyes. As Nick was saying, people just looking skywards, not quite believing what they're seeing in front of their eyes, as these two huge buildings, we see black smoke billowing from the top of them. An absolutely terrifying sight.
Sorry, Helen, we could in fact see pictures there of people looking skyward. The whole of Manhattan appears to have come to a standstill, people incredulous at what they've seen before them. Let's go live now to President Bush and his statement.
I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
So the words of President George W. Bush, visibly moved there by the situation that he finds himself and his country in. He said, we're going to find those folks who committed this act. Clearly, according to President George W. Bush and those who are informing him of the situation, he's in no doubt whatsoever that this was a terrorist attack on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in the center of Manhattan in New York this morning. Kevin Dunn is our defense correspondent. Kevin, we are watching the pictures. We're all learning moment by moment a little more. What do you make of what you see?
Well, from what we've seen and from what President Bush has just appeared to confirm, that it does appear to have been a terrorist attack, a deliberate, concerted attack by 2 aeroplanes on 2 towers. For that to happen, there must have been an incredible degree of organization, of planning, and of execution. These planes were apparently overtaken, hijacked. One can only assume that the perpetrators put themselves at the controls of these aircraft and flew them directly at the Twin Towers in an apparent suicide mission designed to kill anybody on those planes and as many people as possible within the Twin Towers of the Trade Center, just when those hundreds and hundreds of people within the Trade Center would have been beginning work at 9 o'clock this morning.
Now, we don't want to speculate wildly, but you said a suicide mission. The fact that this very clearly was a suicide mission, would that lead you to any conclusion as to who potentially might have perpetrated this attack?
Well, it would indicate a degree of fanaticism which could only explain this kind of attack. It's obviously too early to speculate on who might have been responsible, but we know that the Americans themselves have declared an enemy of Osama bin Laden and that he has been a target for their attacks in the past in retaliation for terrorist attacks. In the past, the Americans' targets perpetrated by Osama bin Laden tend to have been foreign embassies, which are very vulnerable in foreign countries. And there were attacks, you may recall, on the American embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. And in response, President Clinton, as he then was, fired cruise missile attacks against a target in Khartoum in Sudan and targets in Afghanistan. But as far as we know, Osama bin Laden, who is just about public enemy #1 in the United States, remains at large, is extremely well funded, extremely well resourced, and may be the kind of person who would be behind such an attack. The Americans, of course, as well, have long generated animosity in areas of the Middle East, which at the moment is going through another crisis, and they have engendered Arab and Palestinian anger in the past, so it may be a group that is related to the most extreme elements of Arab anger.
As we look at pictures, the pictures of the crash itself, they are breathtaking. The initial plume of smoke there from the initial crash, and then we see the second plane coming in from the right-hand side and hitting the other tower, which is, of course, on the far side of our picture there. All we can see is the explosion out of the right-hand side. We get information that one of the planes that crashed, and it may be that second plane, which looked like a fairly substantially sized aircraft, was an American Airlines 767 that was flying from Boston. That would be a passenger aircraft, a 767, flying this morning from Boston. We heard President Bush there say that the full resources of his government